Now, as South Africa marks 10 years after the Marikana Massacre, where 34 mine workers died, the Socio-Economic Rights Institute, or SERI, says that most of the recommendations that came out of the Farlam Commission are yet to be implemented. SERI is a public interest law centre representing 36 families of the miners who died at the hands of police in August 2012. Now, in May, the Sibanye Stillwater, which took over or acquired Lonmin in 2019, threatened workers with retrenchments following their demand of 1,000 Rand salary increases. And joining us now we were hoping to be joined by Aisha Fundi, who is the wife of one of the Lonmin security guards, Hassan Fundi, who was killed in clashes with the mine workers. But we're still struggling to get her. As soon as she does come on, we'll put her on and join the conversation. But for now, I'm joined by Attorney and Executive Director of the Socio-Economic Rights Institute of South Africa, Nomzamo Zondo. Nomzamo, thanks so much for speaking to us, and good to see you again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Nomzamo, it's a decade later, and just reading, you are saying that basically your concern is that most of the recommendations that came out of the Farlam Commission are yet to be implemented. So let's talk about those which have not been implemented and what legal action SERI is banking on to bring justice for the victims.
So one of the concerns that we have is the policing of protests, and one of the positive outcomes out of the commission is that the one recommendation that was implemented was the setting up of a panel of experts on policing and the management of crowds. And that panel of experts issued a report. It took 3 years for that report to be released. It was released by the Minister of Police last year in March. But even then, we have not really seen how the police plan to implement their recommendations of that panel. And even worse, that the SABC has not really issued a statement on how they're going to change their policies to kind of meet the problems that were identified by that panel.
Now, Nomzamo, one of the specific calls that you've made along with the Right to Know campaign was that former Northwest Deputy Police Commissioner William Mpembe, who was implicated by a witness during his trial, as having been the one who issued a command to the police officers to shoot at the miners. You wanted him jailed along with everyone else who was involved. What's the latest development in these cases?
So in relation to what happened in that week, there's been very little progress in terms of criminal prosecutions, and that's starting from the incident that starts from the 12th up until the 16th. The one positive development has been the criminal prosecution of General Mpembe, along with 5 other policemen, for the killings, which includes 3 mine workers whose families that we represent and 2 policemen. And that incident happened on the 13th of August. The Northwest High Court has been hearing that case, and evidence has been brought by people, including police officers who were on the ground that day, who gave evidence that General Mpembe was the person who gave an instruction that the police must throw stun grenades and use tear gas on the group of miners who were at that time peaceful. And that instruction started a mayhem, which resulted in the death of at least 5 people and the serious injury of about 6 others.
So, and I've asked this question several times this morning, what is the problem? What are the challenges? Why is justice seemingly being meted out so slowly?
I would say that there is a recalcitrance on the part of the state, and that kind of continues in a line of refusing to admit that Marikana was a massacre and refusing to accept any wrongdoing on the part of the state. Beyond that, there's also a failure on the state to act to hold the mining company accountable, to the extent that anything that the mine has done, it has done out of its own free will. The state is not required to do anything to address the conditions in Marikana, to try and heal the victims or even engage the miners, who many of continue to remain employees of Sibanye now. And with those two problems, we sit in a situation where the victims have had to push for justice, with the support of civil society, with the support of other communities who support them, but with very little response on the part of the state and on the part of the mining company, and indeed even those that were politically responsible for the massacre.
So, on the one side, that seems pretty clear-cut in seeking justice for those who were massacred. But of course, there was a build-up, that culminated on that fateful day. And Aisha Fundi joins us now. And Aisha's husband was one of the two security guards who worked for Lonmin, who was killed in the days leading up to the massacre. Aisha, thank you so much for speaking to us. Welcome to Morning Live.
Yeah, good morning to you and thank you for having me.
Aisha, it's been 10 years, but I think yours is a voice that perhaps hasn't been amplified as much as we should have over the years. But 10 years after what happened in Marikana, talk to us about, how you've been dealing with the death of your husband and how things have progressed for you. How are you feeling after all this time?
I don't know even where to start, but feeling my mental state is a very difficult position. One, that my husband is coming originally from Malawi. He was the firstborn of the 7 siblings. He was providing for me and my 3 children plus his family. So his family now, they did not have a father, and the mother father passed away a long time. So they were all looking up to him. Now that I took my husband's position at the work, I'm having a problem because the company did not want to please me in my husband's salary. We were told that we must start on the front because my husband died as a superintendent of the sports team, which means he was at the official level. So for me to supply the family becomes a problem because now the family look up to me as I represent their struggle. So for me and my children, things are very bad. One, because the government, when they were compensating Arab families, they compensated before the families that the loved ones were killed by the police. And the first 10 families were not yet being compensated. That is the situation we find ourselves in, and being exposed to the mining industry where your husband has been killed, you will always be
Aisha, my sincere apologies. The quality on the line is really not good. I'm struggling to hear you. And I think if I'm struggling, everybody else, has worse struggles in just making out what you're saying to us. So we're going to try and see if we can, fix that particular problem and just get Aisha back on a clearer line. But Nomzamo, you're still with us. And, as I said to Aisha, perhaps part of the story that hasn't been amplified sufficiently, those who died in the lead up to the eventual massacre. And of course, there's also justice that needs to be served to those families.
Definitely. And I think when I spoke earlier about political recalcitrance, I feel if the state stance would have considered all of the victims, including Mrs. Fundi, included Mrs. Mabelane, whose husband also died together with Mrs. Fundi's husband, then we would have been in a much different situation. The reason you are able to say the voices of the other families were amplified is because, yes, they were represented by lawyers. Yes, they had the civil society behind them. I think that's partially because those families were killed by the police, who are exercising a power that they've been given by us as the South African public. We've given them the power to manage society through policing, and I think I accept that the other 7 families are easier to kind of forget, maybe because they haven't had lawyers who come in understanding that they're on the back. Because when we started participating in the commission and representing the families, they were not acknowledged as victims. And we had to knock on every door and push every wall to make sure that they are recognized and that the rights that are due to them are given to them. Even now, we feel like we're still engaged in that battle. But I accept, for instance, when the families we represent speak about compensation, when they speak about criminal prosecution, when they speak even about the possibility of the massacre being acknowledged through a public holiday, they are speaking things that also apply to the family of Mrs. Fundi, that apply to the families of the other 3 non-striking mine workers, the Langa family, the Twala family, and the Mabibi family. They're speaking things that also have application in the lives of the 2 policemen who died on the 13th of August, who I spoke about earlier when I spoke about the criminal case that's going on in the Northwest High Court. Even those families are still asking questions about where is the investigation of our loved one's death? What is National Prosecuting Authority doing about that? When are we going to sit in a court and hear evidence on exactly who killed them and why? And I want to be clear that the reason we have all this confusion is because for a long time, the state has said, because of those earlier 10 deaths, the massacre was justified. And as a result, they've done no work to make us understand who's liable, who's responsible for those earlier 10 deaths. And as you know, SERI represents 3 of the families that are included in those earlier 10 deaths because who were killed by the police on the 13th of August. But beyond that, even in the 7 families, people are aware that there is only probably a handful of people who are responsible for those deaths. And once you acknowledge that reality, then you accept that the state massacred 34 mine workers who were part of 3,000 mine workers who were on strike. And as a result, left a scar on hundreds of others who continue now working in the mining industry, who remain traumatized in Marikana.
So we'll continue asking about the quest for justice. Aisha Fundi is back with us. She's on the line. Aisha, Nomzamo, please just hang tight for me. Right, at this point, let's just conclude our conversation with Nomzamo and, of course, Aisha, and this as we focus on what happened in Marikana 10 years ago, but also where we are today in terms of just making sure that justice will ultimately be served for all those who perished, all those who lost their lives during that particular tragedy. All right, I think you can hear there. Aisha, she is on the line. As soon as she comes on, we will, of course, just cross to her so we can hear from Aisha, who is the widow of one of the 2 security guards who was killed in the lead-up to the massacre of the 16th of August 2012. But in the meantime, let's quickly speak to Nomzamo. And Nomzamo is, of course, a lawyer, and she's with SERI, speaking to us about the work that they have been doing with regard to seeking justice on behalf of the families. Nomzamo Zondo, thanks so much for staying with us. Now, we were talking about, also justice for the other 10 and why perhaps that is a story that hasn't been as well told, as well documented as the others. But of course, Nomzamo, at this point, people are likely to become despondent. It's already been a decade. So can people rightfully still hold out hope that the sort of justice that they actually seek will be meted out?
Look, so I think from the experience, I think of the families from 2012 and probably right through to 2015, when they had to litigate to force President Zuma to release the Commission's report, the families didn't expect the journey of justice to be an easy one, and at the very least anticipated that it would be at least longer than the decade. And because in the process of the last 7 years, they've seen things happen. They've had the satisfaction of seeing at least 9 police officers being charged in 2 separate court cases over what happened in that week in Marikana. They have received some compensation. And even though things are moving slowly, they are seeing that because they press on for justice, they are giving those who are responsible for the massacre very little choice in making sure that they get it. They are also giving those who are responsible for making sure that they do get justice very little choice, because questions are being asked about what the NPA is doing to make sure they have justice. Questions are being asked about IPID's investigations, and indeed the court's willingness and readiness to ensure that the victims have justice.
Nomzamo? My apologies to just interject there, but as you know, we've been struggling with Aisha's line, so I believe she is there. So let's just try again to see if we can actually speak to Aisha for a short while. Aisha, I hope that you can hear me. Just talking about, again, where you are 10 years on, your experience and your quest for justice as one of the widows of the 2 security guards who were killed in the lead up to the ultimate massacre. So what has your journey been like? Aisha, if you can hear me, please just indicate.
Ma'am, I'm sure this is a wrong number.
Our apologies. So I think we will have to try Aisha at a later stage. Just had some serious difficulty with that line. But Aisha Fundi is, of course, the wife of one of the Lonmin security guards who was killed in the lead up to the clashes with mine workers that resulted in the Marikana Massacre. Hassan Fundi was her husband, and hopefully we'll be able to hear her story at a later stage. But Nomzamo, thank you so much to you as well this morning for telling us about the quest for justice and accountability, of course, as we commemorate a decade since that fateful day. Nomzamo Zondo is an attorney and executive director of the Socio-Economic Rights Institute of South Africa, and we'll leave that one there for the time being.